All right. So I'm going to ask everybody if they can mute and we'll get started. So welcome everybody. Um, yeah, this has been a long time in coming, I think, and both Yulia and myself are very excited that you are here today to discuss something that we are both very passionate about, which is social emotional learning. And this webinar will be geared toward K-12 educators, but I know that there are a couple of higher ed people among you here today, and so this it can be used as a springboard to go and work with your students in higher ed. I want to preface this all to say that we all know that you have been, as educators, have been, let's put it nicely, saturated in the last 12 months during this pandemic. And so we want to be as succinct as possible and as practical as possible. So those of you who know me know that that doesn't always come quite so easy to me, but I will very much attempt to. So our idea in doing this is that we will give you some baseline knowledge, and we can actually go right into the next slide, some really quick baseline knowledge about social emotional learning. And then why, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll touch upon that before really focusing on some practical takeaway techniques that you can use. Some of them you can even use tomorrow in your classroom if you wanted, if you haven't planned yet. We wanted to have something that is bite-sized, is accessible to everybody, and that could reframe your classroom in a blended environment, in a completely online environment, and even in a physical classroom. These are techniques you can use in a physical classroom. Okay. Yulia, do you have anything to add before I begin?
No, I think you hit it on the head. Yeah.
Great.
For me, it's very important that if you just walk away after this and there is something so simple that you can say, okay, I see the benefits and I can easily implement this from tomorrow onwards, I'm very happy, because I think that's what we need, something hands-on, practical, easy to implement. So I hope you've taken at least one thing away today.
Good. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's just dig right into the research base. And the research base on social emotional learning is pretty vast. So we are going to define social emotional learning as the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy to others, establish and maintain supportive relationship, and make responsible and caring decisions. Now that comes straight out of CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is sort of an organization that is at the heart of social emotional learning. And CASEL has developed a model, which you see on your right-hand side, which is a 5-pronged model. And they have broken it down, or social emotional learning, into 5 components, which are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And when you look at social emotional curricula, oftentimes you will see these 5 concepts or constructs highlighted in the different chapters or the different units, and there's a major focus on these 5. Social emotional learning, there has been a vast amount of research done on social emotional learning and children. And it has been found to promote all of these things. So when explicitly taught, students can learn to be more self-aware, manage themselves, have better social interactions and relationships, and make responsible decision making. Now, social emotional learning and programming has also really been shown to improve students' attitudes and beliefs in themselves and the world around them. So their selves, their peers, their schools, their community. And it is a foundation for better judgment, as well as academic performance, okay? We also see that social emotional learning reduces classroom management issues. There's fewer conduct problems. There's less emotional distress, and of course, improved grades and scores. So there's all sorts of benefits to social emotional learning. However, and you know, one of the roots of today is when Yulia and I were talking, we found that when we went online about just under a year ago, that the curriculum, everyone went into panic mode, and a lot of the curriculum was boiled down, and they said, okay, what is absolutely necessary, and what can we do online? And so it was reading and math and science, and sort of getting down to those bare bones. And a lot of what we were hearing from other teachers, our colleagues, is that the social emotional element just kind of went out the window. And unfortunately, that's when we really, really needed it, because what we found during the pandemic was that in the pandemic, the stressors in students' lives increased, and our stress has increased quite a bit too, but as students as well. And young people don't always know how to channel that. And it has come out in many, many different ways. And so one of the ways that social emotional learning can benefit students is that it can reduce some of the stressors in their lives. It also enables them to learn sort of this skill set as we've talked about. I'm sorry, I'm still letting people in, okay? So, for our argument is that during the pandemic, unfortunately, where social emotional learning has stepped back, there is a need more than ever. We know from neuroscience that when students are stressed, that they go into sort of this fight or flight mode. And we saw a lot of this with our students, that they either sort of curled up into themselves, or they started behaving and acting out in strange ways that we had never seen before. And one of the ways what we can do, and the techniques that we're going to talk about today, some of those ways, it allows students to get out of that brainstem fight or flight mode and more back into the prefrontal cortex, where we have thinking and problem solving, and you can get back into your everyday academics. So social emotional learning really go hand in hand, and it's really, really important and necessary, especially in a time like this. Okay. So I was trying to be as succinct as possible, and with that, I will go over and turn it over to my colleague, Yulia.
Thank you. So just to avoid these typical technical issues we all experience during distance learning and blended learning, we're not changing screens or anything, so Jess will just click through it, okay? So if you hear an awkward next please, that is directed to the slide coordinator. I'm gonna start with a few techniques you can easily implement in early years and primary, but a lot of them are also easy to adapt for older students. So I had the chance to work with the responsive classroom approach. It is something that I think we all know. Every school I worked with, every leadership team I talked to, they want engaging academics. They want the school to be a positive community, to work closely with the parents. They want that the students take lead of and they have an active part of their learning, that they're engaged in it, that it's an effective management. Everyone wants that. And often I feel like it's nicely written on the boards, but it's difficult to actually implement it. And when you ask for the how and how can we do it, how is it possible, it's really hard to implement in a teacher's daily business. And I've experienced the responsive classroom approach as an effective way to achieve all these 4 domains. So the responsive classroom approach is described by Castle, where we just saw the little graphic before, as the most and well-designed evidence-based SEL program. So they have clear evidence for a higher achievement in math and reading. They have research for improved school climate and for higher quality instructions. So it's not a nice to have, it really is proven that this is working. So responsive classroom is a student-centered social and emotional approach to teaching and discipline. I don't quite like the word discipline in there, but it is, I feel, especially in early years and primary, a big thing, and especially in early years, when you hear the screaming naughty chair and these kind of things. That's why it has a big focus also on that positive approach to discipline. The responsive classroom approach creates a safe, joyful and engaging classroom and wider school community. I found a little video that sums that up so you get a bit of a better feel for what it is and why I think it's fabulous to implement.
Every child deserves a warm, safe, and joyful learning environment, a place that supports them to take risks, to learn, and reach their full potential. That's the core principle of Responsive Classroom, which is now used in classrooms and schools across the country. Responsive Classroom is not a separate curriculum. Instead, it's an approach to teaching. It offers educators practices that they can use throughout the day to expand children's learning and create positive communities, both in the classroom and throughout the school. Responsive classroom techniques don't end at the classroom door. They can be used to build a positive school culture as well. 2 major studies concluded that the responsive classroom approach increases student engagement, improves academic achievement, decreases discipline problems, and leads to more high-quality teaching.
Responsive Classroom has helped me to become a better teacher. So I think it's totally changed my approach to how I interact with them.
I noticed a change in my effectiveness as a teacher with morning meeting and with Responsive Classroom as a whole.
My favorite thing about the Responsive Classroom is that it works. I've seen it work as a classroom teacher. I've also seen it work as a building principal.
Everyone is invested in what we're doing for kids, and that's the power of school-wide Responsive Classroom.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that gives you a clear idea in a very short overview what Responsive Classroom is about. And I like the comment that where he says, I like about it that it works. And I definitely definitely sign that statement. I've worked with it, and I've something that is so easy to implement to have such a big impact. It doesn't have to be the whole school that needs to follow it. If you start implementing little bits, and I'm gonna show you now on the next slide a few examples how you can implement it, and it's a really, really easy way where you can have an impact on your students within a short period of time. So the Responsive Classroom has these 4 practices. It's the daily morning meeting, the proactive approach to discipline, positive teacher language, and giving students choices in their learning. I think most of us are doing all 4. I think what we're missing is where are these linked, and how can we easily implement it without us spending lots and lots of times to show an evidence, to link it in our planning documents. All of this can be done with this approach. So what I like to focus on today is the daily morning meeting, as it is something that supports SEL immense, and is something, no matter where you are, face-to-face, blended learning, or full on online, it's something you can easily implement. So the morning meeting, next slide, please, Ms. James. Thank you. So the morning meeting, most of us do a morning meeting, know of a morning meeting, but how can we really focus our morning meetings on SEL? So first of all, why should we do them? It definitely sets the tone for a respectful and engaged learning environment. This approach is definitely focusing on creating a climate of trust between the students and the teacher. It builds and enhances relationships and connections among students, and also supports student-teacher relationships. It merges academics, social and emotional learning in a very easy way, and it motivates the students by addressing their need to belong, to feel significant, and to have fun. And I think this is something, since we went online, that's really missing. We're losing that connection. And I feel in a blended environment, especially because you as educator, you run between, you always feel like you're letting either the ones online down or the one in class, and you're losing that connection. And the daily morning meetings are just creating that sense of belonging. Everyone is a part of it. Everyone gets a voice. Everyone feels safe. And I think that's an easy way for SEL, that we should not just tick the box. We should really focus on doing it and best quality. So the morning meeting of the Responsive Classroom has 4 components. So each morning meeting has a greeting, a sharing, an activity, and a message. So the greeting I have to say, I presented it on a slide, especially for the ones at home. So they have a focus point. They know we're following it through. It's the same every day. So certain routines, they know what's coming. You can have it up as a welcome screen when they enter your calls. So that supports the safe climate of trust. So the greeting will definitely set the tone for the class and for the rest of the day. It provides a sense of recognition and belonging. And the Responsive Classroom greetings are taking it like really to the point where they say, okay, you have 25 students in your class, but we want every single one to be greeted individual with your name, maybe sometimes with your first and your last name. It sounds like it takes up a lot of time, and you think, oh, okay, but they all know each other. But a lot of these children are hardly greeted by their names. When they walk through the school, it's the old teachers that recognize them. Often it's the only time of the day where they get that one-on-one acknowledgement. So it's really important in the Responsive Classroom approach that they get that time. The whole class welcomes that one person. For that split second, you are the most important thing in that moment. And that is just such a confidence booster. The sharing activity in the responsive class, in the responsive classroom, it's something to share on a certain subject. This obviously varies by grade level. It is related to SEL. It's related to what your kids need. So, for example, my morning meeting yesterday was all about trust because it came up between the students. So the sharing activity would be something simple as, can you think of a time you had to trust someone? And you give them a little bit of time, write it down on your slide so they already have time to think about it and they can share that. So that sharing helps students to get to know each other, to see maybe, okay, I actually have a lot in common with that person. I didn't even spend time with that person on the playground, but I've got a lot in common with that person. It develops important social and emotional competencies. It teaches thinking, listening, and speaking skills, and it strengthens the language development. So I often feel my EAL students who would normally struggle to participate in a full-on classroom conversation, within that very short, simple question in the morning meeting, they can be a part of that conversation. So it really gets them involved. And then we have the activity. The activity can be linked to academics. It can be just something like, we had a trust building activity. So it can be linked to anything, but what it contributes to the sense of a community or a group identity. We're doing something together. And it fosters an active participation. It also encourages inclusion and cooperation, and it helps to learn the value of persistence and patience. So as a quick example, we're playing a simple number game, and I introduced it at the beginning of the year. And as a whole class, you try to count as far as you can, but nobody is allowed to say the number at the same time. So I would start it off with 1, and then someone else says 2, says 3. As soon as they say the number at the same time, they need to start at the beginning. And today we had a record-breaking, I think we made it to 14 today. It's a quick, easy game, but they were over the moon by achieving that after such a long time. So
earphones are in my car. My earphones.
Oh, I have. That definitely showed the impact of a group activity like that. Yes, and then the daily message. It develops and reinforces language, art, math, other academic skills you're gonna relate into your message. It builds a community through shared written information, and it eases the transition into the day, whatever follows up. It sounds really time consuming, and Responsive Classroom, they actually suggest a 20 minutes morning meeting. And I know we don't get 20 minutes, unfortunately, on social emotional learning. But you can implement all 4 throughout the day. So I unfortunately do not have my 20 minutes anymore that I can just spend on the morning meeting, but I will just, the first lesson of the day, have at least my message, my sharing, and my greeting. And the activity I implement throughout the days, maybe 2 different ones, and it will always refer back to the morning meeting. So you will come back and go like, remember we were talking about trust this morning, let's do a trust activity. So these 4 components are easy to implement, but have a very, very huge impact on your learning. You see the resources for morning meetings down there. There are ready-made morning meetings with all 4 components from kindergarten up to grade 8. So you see a huge variety. You can mix it. It's mainly for the beginning of the school year, where you talk a lot about rules. But even now, if you're coming back to the classroom, or some of your students going back to distance learning, I feel this year especially, you will always have to talk about rules and these kind of things. So it's a very good resource for you to have a look at and to get a feel what a morning meeting with a responsive classroom approach looks like. Next, please. The next technique to easily, I find, implement SEL in our daily lives is literature. And that literally goes for every single grade level. I found that quote, and I think that quote, you can have a read by yourself, Reid. I think that quote just says it all and explains the importance of literacy and SEL. It installs moral values, it strengthens personal character, and it shapes behavior, which is something as simple as implementing a story. Especially early years are reading stories on a daily basis. That is part of the daily business in early years. And instead of picking any story, and I know a lot of early years have to go by the book, and it's Jack and the Beanstalk, and then 2 weeks later it's the Hungry Caterpillar, and which is great to teach your math and teach your language and teach your art through it. But very often you can just choose a book where you can get all that in, but it has a strong focus on SEL. So here is a SEL book list that has over 100 books for early years in primary that are related to SEL skills. And in a way, it's very easy. You either go by what your students need. What is something they're really struggling with? What is something that comes up in your classroom on a daily basis? Let it be sharing, let it be bullying. You go on the list, you find more than one book for that skill that you wanna teach or tackle, and you build around it. Or you just read any book, especially early years in primary, and in each story you at least find 1 to 2 SEL skills by just talking about the character's feelings, the emotions, the ending, which normally has perseverance, how did he solve problems, etc., etc. So by maybe not only focusing on the math that you want to teach through a story, also point out the SEL part of each story. And it's very easily done. It's part of your daily business already. And like I said, it can be done in primary. For example, I started reading with my 3rd graders today, Matilda. It was a reading comprehension lesson. And we ended up having a full-on SEL session because we read the first 2 chapters and they discussed how rude these parents are. And we explored compassion and empathy, and nothing of this was planned, but it was amazing. And that's exactly what we need, especially at this time. So easy way for SEL. Then we have another one that most early years practitioners do already, and that is show and tell. Am I correct? Yes. Most early years teachers have at least once a year a show and tell. So children get a box. I don't know if people are allowed to take a box anymore, but they're allowed to bring something in or show something in front of the camera. And mainly it needs to be connected to academics. And I think, no, don't connect it to academics. The show and tell is so obvious. It builds confidence, it raises self-awareness, pride, self-esteem. It develops oral language skills, communication, active listening for the audience, questioning comes up. It develops higher thinking skills, etc., etc. So it's a great tool for early years, but I think you should extend it to primary. Unfortunately, often these children only get heard when they come to school. Often we are the only one who gives them a voice. And with distance learning, blended learning, a lot of that is taken away. And we want all these confident speakers and holding presentations and all of this, but the foundation comes with these show and tells in early years and primary. So show and tell, early years, primary, give them that 5-10 minutes and let them share whatever they want to share with you. I think I've seen every single pet since distance learning. Why? Because kids are so proud to share that with you. They want to talk about it, and it's easy for them to talk about it because they can relate to it. So by narrowing it down to academics, we limit that, and we're cutting out that opportunity for language development. So if they are allowed to just present anything that they've done at home, something they've learned new, something they have achieved, something they're interested, you will get much higher outcome and participation. And it all links, especially with your language development. So I think it's a very good way of implementing in early years, implementing SEL in early years and primary classrooms. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll switch over to me. And yeah, I took sort of the middle years, or the K-12 spectrum, I guess, sort of pushing it a little bit more into what we could or may implement in secondary school. And so I also have 3 techniques that I feel that you could utilize very easily in your classroom. The first one being artwork. And you know, I was listening to someone speak about artful thinking last night, and it sort of sparked something that no matter what grade you're in, you know, especially as you get older, and the conversations you have and the learning you do becomes more abstract. You know, it's really nice to be able to come down and do some artwork. So why do we want to do more artwork in our classroom? That sounds very naive in a lot of ways. Let's do more art, but it's quite important. Art education has been shown to increase self-confidence. It actually increases students' social skills as well as their metacognition. Now, in this blended environment, it also reduces the screen time aspect, which I know that is a huge topic with so many educators and parents. It also allows students time to process. So they're not actively doing something to produce work, but they are stepping back and allowing sort of more of a creative flow to emerge. And in doing that, they're reducing their stress, but they're also connecting and releasing their emotions. And that is important whether you're 5 or you're 25 or you're 45, frankly. So, you know, implementing art in any way you can. Well, this is the thing. In any way you can, in any discipline. What I would say is that I would, in essence, urge you, instead of implementing art and saying, let's draw a picture of X, or try to, you know, copy this picture to this picture. That is not allowing for the creative flow to occur. And what you want to do more is allow students to give them options. And there are a variety, and this is on YouTube. There's a variety of YouTube stations and channels that students can go, or you can go, to get ideas about how you can implement this in your classroom. So this is more about allowing students choices. And two ways I was thinking about this. I was thinking about it in language arts. So if you're reading a book at any grade level, you can take a scene and ask students, well, according to this character, or choose a character and see how, draw a picture and see what this scene is like from their perspective. And sort of giving those creative options for students and allowing them time sort of to release emotions, build up frustrations, etc. They will gravitate toward those characters that they identify with, that they feel share their emotions, and through that, there can be a lot of processing of their emotions and their stressors. The other idea that I was thinking is sort of in more of a math or a science. You see the example on the right that was actually done by my son in home learning last year in the spring. And his art teacher presented Castle and Sun, and this was in conjunction with art and the overlap through math. So they were looking at geometric shapes, and they were also looking at Castle and Sun by Paul Klee. And so he was asked to go and use the geometric shapes to go and build a work of art. And he spent hours and hours and hours picking out the right colors and the right geometric shapes. And for him, this was a great project. And I got to see firsthand as a parent, and also as an educator and a researcher. I was just so interested, but as a parent, he was so focused and he was so calm while doing this. And this was a really calming exercise for him. So whatever discipline that you're teaching, I would encourage you to try to implement arts education in that creative way that's going to allow for stress relief and increased focus. The other technique that I would also bring to the table is journal writing. Now, journal writing doesn't have to be something that is only a language arts thing. Journal writing can be across the curriculum in whatever discipline that you're teaching. It allows for self-reflection. It allows for you to reflect on your processes, to increase your metacognition, whether that is in language arts or math or science. It doesn't really matter. It also is going to improve your writing skills, right? So that's something that we want all of our students to have and is very poignant for our curriculum and our standards. If you're going to go more toward a social emotional down the social emotional path of journal writing, there are a lot of ways you can implement this. This is not a free-for-all. It can be, but I would more advise that you use social emotional prompts. The link on the bottom actually is a Mind Brain Parent. They have a packet of cards that they call the Social Emotional Learning Essential Questions. And these essential questions are actually tied back to the Castle model, sort of the 5-prong model. And you can use these as educators, as parents, as prompts for your journal writing, for your conversation, for any kind of discussion, morning meeting, going back to the responsive classroom. So that also you can use, you can use elements like that. The other thing is just going and implementing your essential questions. If you have essential questions in your lesson that are tied to social emotional learning, For example, I saw a great class about forgiveness, and it was a history class, but they started with the thematic element of forgiveness, and students were asked to write in a journal about what is forgiveness and what does it mean to you. And this really allows students to start to process their ideas about what forgiveness is, and sort of reflect and have that moment of self-reflection, at the same time improving their writing skills. So, going back to the content standards that you're, and the skills standards that you're aiming for, that are so important apparently these days. So the last bit that I want to talk about is peer feedback. And peer feedback, I know that is quite the buzzword these days, and a lot of people do try to implement peer feedback. This is a little bit more structured, and this comes out of Harvard's Project Zero, and it's entitled The Ladder of Feedback. And the ladder of feedback is really a much more structured routine that establishes more of a culture of trust and support. A lot of times when we implement peer feedback, or even when we're giving peer feedback to our students, we tend to focus on the deficit. What didn't you do? What is wrong with this? How can you make it better? However, the ladder of feedback really starts out about clarification and value. So it encourages students to give positive feedback to each other. It also can encourage you to give positive feedback to your students if you use it in a teacher-student interaction. Okay, this is also, tying it back to social emotional learning. This is also how you develop, or how students can develop self-awareness. Self-awareness through their active listening and through also them giving feedback to their peers. So how do we implement this model? It's very, very important that you need to explicitly teach this. So this is a routine that you would use over and over and over in your classroom. And you can actually show this PDF, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. It's readily available on the website below. And you can use this for any type of feedback. So for writing, for projects, for presentations, anything. And you go through each step of the ladder, starting at the bottom rung. The first part is that you clarify. So you ask any questions that might help your understanding. The second is adding value. And it's not just, that was great, I really liked it, but I really liked fill in the blank because, and then you get a little bit more specific, and it's sort of supporting students to become more specific. Then they start to develop more active listening skills, and this ties all back in to their social skills in their social emotional learning. Then you go and you state your concerns. It seems to me that this piece is missing, or I wonder if statements. I mean, these are all built in right in the PDF. And then finally, you come to the suggestions at the very end. So this really allows students to feel good and to feel confident about giving feedback to each other, but also receiving confidence. And that interaction is so, so very important. So those are what Julia and I came up with as the 6 techniques that we thought would, depending on what you teach and the grade level you teach at, might be helpful for you to go and to get more of a social emotional learning component in your classroom. And I think before we wrap up today, because we are also aware that you have other commitments and time, Julia has one more thing to add, so I will.
Yeah, I just think talking about SEL, and we bending over backwards to do the best for our students. And I think one of the few professions who go to bed and thinking about what to implement and how to do to really get to every single student and their needs. And in all of this, we forget ourselves. And I think talking about SEL, we need to make sure that we don't forget ourselves, and we need to practice and model self-care, because that modeling and practicing is a huge, huge part of teaching SEL. And I think if you in a blended model or online, you need to set these boundaries for yourself. And by modeling, tell your kids that you have a break, you have a screen break now, and you do that because you need that break to then be ready for the next lesson. And what you do, you walk away from the screen, you have a nice cup of tea, share that with your students. So model it, actively model it, so they understand that that is okay. Share with them that it's been a tough day and you had lots of technical difficulties, and how did that make you feel? Share that with your students. Only by sharing that, they're gonna learn. They more likely to model you than anyone else. So they copy you than anyone else. So model that, show them, set your boundaries. I think that's something being now constantly available, and lots of schools expect you to, within 20 minutes, answer these student emails, parent emails, whatever. We are just available. There is no rain days anymore. There is no snow days anymore. We are just constantly available. So we need to set boundaries for ourselves. And you need to just decide, okay, this is it. That's the time where I cut off. No matter what, that email can wait for the next day, because you matter, and you can only deliver that if you are well and if you look after yourself. And I think we forget that often as teachers anyway, but I think since we all went online, we forgot that even more. And I think it's just more important than ever before that we look after ourselves, and that we connect ourselves with uplifting colleagues. It's a lot on us going on around us already that's negative, and that's just dragging you down, and let alone that the technical side of it can drive you crazy. So you don't need bad talk. You also don't need negative talk to yourself. Use positive self-talk. Have these things. Treat yourself, whatever works for you. But I think it's the most important thing in these times, in this school year, is to practice and model self-care. So I hope we always say that easily, but I hope you all have a way of doing it.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Well, we will open the floor to questions. If there are any. I have recorded this, so and we will happily share the slides with anyone. So please feel free to email me if you would like the slides or more information. I hope it has come across that both Julia and myself are very passionate. We love this topic, and we love supporting children and also supporting educators. So however we can help, please feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, please open the floor for questions, if you can in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself, I guess.
Hi, good evening.
Hello, good
Nilambai
evening.
here. Nilambai here. I'm working in Westminster School, and I'm working as a head of pastoral for secondary. So it's much more relevant for my area, and we actually, from September, we started working on SEL background. So when you were actually doing your presentation, I could see the kind of discussions we had in our pastoral team. And I like the idea of the morning meetings, because in our school there is a 20 minutes time in the morning, which is we call as a registration period or a core value period, which is more related to the teacher and the student talking to, being with each other. The problem, I would like to actually know how we can make those morning meetings more effective, because students being at home, most of the online learners, so it becomes problem for us to make them sure that they start attending the school right at that time, and then create an interest where they are kind of, where we can bring this social emotional aspect which will connect to their academics. What we are finding we are doing right now is we have a mindfulness activities plan, and we have different other activities where they will probably awareness related activities and all. But I still feel I'm not happy with the way we have to connect with those emotional building.
Do you want to take that? You're the expert there.
Yeah, I think if you have these 20 minutes, that's amazing. And if you go on the Responsive Classroom website, you find lots of resources, lots of free videos that explain what I can go on hours about the Responsive Classroom. So that was a very, very short overview today. So when you go on the website, it's very well explained how you can implement it. And if you know already which way you're going, what are your focus on, you then can link it to your Responsive Classroom morning meetings. I think at the beginning, it's very hard to start a morning meeting straight away with an SEL skill. I wouldn't start a talk in week 1 of school you're doing about trust or anything like that. Maybe your sharing activity can be as simple as everyone stands up if you like to spend your leisure time going to the cinema, do this. If you like to do this, do that. Share something personal so they get in that habit of sharing, voicing their ideas, opinions, so they feel comfortable with that. And when you achieve that and you achieve the routine, that's when you then start linking things in about, for example, an open mindset, positive self-talk.
Yeah.
Kind of things come later. Make them aware of the routines first, that they have a little game, that they have a little sharing, the greeting, and you will see that they enjoy that, and they will come and they will take part of it, because it is a fun time. It is not math and it's not English and it's not science. It is fun. And as soon as you have laid that down, which you get lots of resources on the website, they will come. And as soon as they're aware of the routine and they come to start the day like that with you, you then can easily implement in your message, in your sharing, the SEL.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Other ideas? I'm looking through the chat.
You ladies have done a brilliant job. Thank you so much for your time and everything that you've shared with us. I'm looking forward to any other webinars that you might have in the future. Thank you.
Oh, okay. We didn't have any planned, but sure. No, and if you have any suggestions for us, and feedback, please feel free to, if you have a subject in mind or anything, feel free.
I would suggest positive education and visible thinking routines.
Yep.
These 2 topics are really hot topics nowadays. So I think if you can touch on that, that would be perfect.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? This is Zainab Al-Agha.
Hi,
I just
Zainab.
have one question. How can we implement the social and emotional learning for students with special needs, who are the last on the list to include them, especially these days where they need us the most in these hard times?
Yeah. Yulia, would you like to address that, or should I?
You can start.
Yeah, okay. So the question was was about special needs students, and I think really any of these techniques, and I'm thinking of the responsive classroom, sort of being inclusive. I'm thinking about show and tell for, primary school, art, journal writing, anything that is open and can be differentiated within your classroom is going to be appropriate for special needs. That's a very big cachet term that, it depends, obviously. And I know that doesn't really give you an answer saying it depends, but I think that depending on the needs of your children in the classroom, you can go and then tailor what you do with them. And I think one of the covenants of SEL techniques, or the ones that we presented here today, is that they're very much open-ended. They're very student-centered. So there's not going to be a right or wrong answer. That doesn't necessarily mean you don't evaluate them, and you can evaluate them given, differentiation metrics, but the techniques here have been open, and they're open and inclusive, and so students of all abilities can go and use them.
I think just relating it back to the morning meeting, from my experience with my SEN kids, I see when they start being part of the morning meeting, they be just silently there. They may not greet someone, but they get greeted. And after being greeted for over a week, they will warm up, and there will be the day where they greet one of the other children back. It is that sense of belonging they get through the greeting, for example. They may not share, they may not be part of sharing, but they being part of it, and they experience how the others share, which also goes back to the climate of trust. And most of my SEN kids will definitely be part of the activities we do, especially if it's a physical activity involved. I'd say 95% are at least part of that. And through the repetition of all of this, and being a similar thing every single day, they very, very quickly adapt and get included in this. I have really good experience with my SEN kids in the morning meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Zainab. Are there any other questions?
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? I have to say I've missed you and missed being listening to you, to be honest. So thank you a lot for the webinar. It was really interesting to see that most of the people actually pay attention to these practices, because it does have huge impact on both families, since we are talking about online learners, and